Hey everybody, welcome in. I'm Michaela Chester for NCAA.com. Today I'm joined by Andy Wittry, who is our college basketball reporter, and he has put together a series of the 11 best players of the decade for college basketball teams. And Andy, let's dive into your Duke team first. And to play devil's advocate here, what is your reasoning behind putting Zion Williamson as the number one guy, and how is this not recency bias?
Yeah, so last year, Zion Williamson was the consensus National Player of the Year and a first-team All-American. We saw him average 22.6 points per game and 8.9 rebounds per game. He helped lead Duke to the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournaments into the Elite Eight. And he also had the single-season highest player efficiency rating of any player last decade at 40.8. So in my eyes, regardless of what team or season or era Zion Williamson played in college basketball last decade or any decade for that matter, he would have been the best Duke player among those who played from 2010 to 2019.
And Duke won two national titles last decade, but the two players that didn't win the championship are at the top of your list. So why did you put them ahead of the rest of the field?
So obviously winning a national title goes a long way, but for me, I mentioned, Zion being the best player of any player on this list, which earns him that number one spot. And then similarly, Marvin Bagley III was a great talent, averaging 21 points and 11 rebounds per game for Duke as a first-team All-American. We saw Duke earn a two-seed and make the Elite Eight with Bagley, and he was at his best when the games meant the most. He averaged 22 points and 10 rebounds in 6 ACC tournament and NCAA tournament games, and he was a 40% three-point shooter. So even though his Duke team did not win a national title, I thought for me, he was the second best single Duke player last decade.
Who would you say was the hardest player to rank on this list and why?
It was Zion's teammate and wingmate, RJ Barrett. He was also a first team All American. He averaged actually the same number of points as Zion at 22.6 points per game, which made it tough because when you have the consensus National Player of the Year as your teammate, how do you then judge RJ when you have this great talent in Zion? So he was also a great scorer, but for him, he was less efficient. It took him 18 and a half shots per game to average those 22.6 points. He wasn't a great three-point shooter at just like 30%. So even though Zion and him were both first-team All-Americans, they were not the same player in terms of their efficiency. So for me, RJ having these great kind of single-season stats, he was a great scorer, but in terms of his efficiency and kind of him in the clutch, I just didn't see him stacking up the same way as Zion, which put him a little bit lower on my list.
Okay, and there are some big names that played at Duke that are now playing in the NBA. There's Jason Tatum, Brandon Ingram, Justice Winslow. There must have been a lot of guys that were hard to not put on this list. So who was the hardest player to not put on there?
Yeah, we'll definitely hear from NBA fans asking, where is Jason Tatum on this list? Where's Brandon Ingram? But for me, it was the three guys who played alongside Jahlil Okafor on that 2015 Duke national championship team. Tyus Jones was the Final Four most outstanding player, and a point guard, Quinn Cook, was also in the backcourt as a team's second leading scorer. Justice Winslow, a freshman, was a great two-way player and a great three-point shooter. And all those guys had a great deserving case to make this list. And I think especially Tyus Jones, being the Final Four most outstanding player, is that he helped them win that title. He was a point guard, a very key player on that team. It was hard to leave him off this list for me.
All right, Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Michaela.